Hello, everyone, and welcome to Waffle and Whiskey's Wednesdays. So, tonight we're going to be reading, hopefully, to the conclusion of my short story in Flights of Fantasy titled Pictures for Pleasure. If you're here, I'm quite happy that you're back as we reach the crescendo of this silliness. So, I certainly hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I am a little bit in love with this story because it's just absolutely ridiculous. So, with that being said, um, I hope you're all having a wonderful week. I should mention that. We're beginning to get to summer here. I have an embarrassment of tomatoes already, and my herb garden is taking off in ways that, frankly, are a little bit frightening. My oregano looks like kudzu at this point, which is okay with me. So, hi, good evening, everybody. Hello. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to read a little bit, and then we're going to talk about waffle charms, a new story, and I'm going to ask you a favor. And I guess that's what we'll do. And please feel free to, yeah. Hello. Hi, Jen. Yeah, I'm all for tomatoes. When I become emperor, and I will be a kind and just emperor, one of the things I plan on doing is decreeing that there will be good tomatoes in January. That's one of my missions in life. So, without further ado, let me get my old man glasses and let's begin. Gus was waiting for them despite a closed sign hanging on the door. He waved them in grandly, a single overhead light casting a buttery circle on the scarred pine floor. In the space stood two easels, paint at the ready, and between them a tall table with a stone crock and two bowls of odd design. "We ain't here to paint like some soccer mom getting tipsy with her crew," Bertie said. "And you shan't be doing anything of the sort," Gus said with unusual gallantry. "I assure you, what I have planned is exactly what you're asking for, if you'll only take a seat." He spread his hands in a placating gesture, then led Stella by the elbow to one of the stools. Bertie trailed behind, suddenly compliant in the wake of his powerful magnetism. Gus had changed once again. Not only was the accent gone, but he seemed taller, more masculine, even on the cusp of dangerous. Settled, the women looked to him, still holding on to their vestigial suspicion. Bertie pointed at the crock and bowls, resting on a table between their seats. "What the hell is that?" The bowls were wide, looked like stone, and had an odd straw built into the edge. Gus lifted one, giving it a long, approving look. "A cup." "A cup," Stella snorted. "Gus, if you think a cup is going to help us against the sex monsters you done created with your—" "Not just any cup," Gus interrupted smoothly. "This is a cup made by my people to hold one of the most sacred things ever known." "You mean beer?" Bertie said, laughing. "I mean exactly that." "How did you know?" "Are you a student of history?" Gus asked, his brow lifted in surprise. "Honey, we're Southerners, not fools," Bertie said. "I stand impressed. This beer might be different from anything you've ever known," Gus said. "Is it a magic panty dropper?" "Because beer already does that, and I'm starting to think you're full of Stella said with heat, but Gus put a hand on her arm, calming her with a touch. "Not just any beer, mine. Songs have been sung about what you will taste, stories carved about what will come next. From my cup comes a power like you've never known, and I share with you to atone for my sins," Gus said. "So it tastes like shit then, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be so damn slow to pour it. Let's get to getting if you're really magic, Gus," Bertie said. "As you will," he said, sweeping up the crock and pouring a thin golden liquid into the cups, then handing one each to the sisters. "Through the straw, if you please. There's cereal in my brew. It gives it the power of the land and my own lineage. You're taking part in something bigger than the mind can imagine." And this is a history professor note. This is actually real. The Sumerians and ancient peoples drank cereal beer because cereal was a part of their caloric intake in beer each day, and they drank it through stone straws. Stella was more phlegmatic about the entire affair, but it was likely her post-orgasmic state of exhaustion had something to do with that. She drank, lifted her brows, then drank again. Okay, so do I have a magic hoo-ha yet or what? Gus snorted, then held out two plain black brushes. Not quite. You have the artistry in you. Now you must paint for me. They took their brushes, staring at them as their cheeks began to flush. I feel strange, Bertie said. Same. You didn't drug us, did you? Stella asked, knowing it was a bit late to complain. On my honor, no. Are you feeling anything inside, like a flutter? Wings unfolding, perhaps? He asked them. It seemed improper to call him Gus for some reason, so the sisters felt their internal thoughts shifting. He was changing again, even as the golden liquid warmed them from within, delicate kisses of movement all along their throats, their necks, and lower. I I am, Bertie admitted, her voice a sensual purr. I feel beautiful. I do too. I love me, Stella said, frank wonder in her voice. Yes, he said, watching them both as their lids drooped, the brushes held inert, waiting for purpose. I told you I would give you that which you most want. It begins here on the canvas before you. Paint your true self. True self? Bertie asked, her tongue thick. He stood very close to them now, his huge presence filling the space. Touching Bertie's face with a delicacy that surprised her, he leaned close, speaking low into her ear. Something tickled at her senses. It was him, seeing her memory, her past. He found what he was looking for. Bertie, standing tall, her breasts proud as she disrobed in front of the boy she thought she loved. When he reached for her, his breath ragged, face a sheen of naked lust, she saw him. He was small, not worth her body or her mind, not even worth her time. He spat a curse and got dressed when she said no, and Bertie knew in that moment she was right. Somehow she knew the man who called himself Gus could see that scene, and he wanted her to paint herself in that moment, her true self. More than a thing, more than a tired woman, she was a goddess. The brush began to move of its own accord, and he turned to Stella, his mind probing her with equal ease. Her secret was far closer to the surface. Her wedding day, a memory that was neither bitter nor sad. There was joy, muted by the whirlwind of the day. She saw herself in the cheap dress, yellow flowers stolen from the park in her hair, a smile as wide as all the world. Her lips were red, her hair up, the scent of barbecue in the air from the church kitchen downstairs. An expectant hum filled the church as organist Miss Winnie warmed up for the fifth time, missing more notes than she hit. Then Stella stepped into the outer room and the sun came through to light her up like she was cast in pure gold. That's it. That's your true self. Paint, Stella. Paint with all your will, and I promise you shall have what you want, he said. They painted. The brushes flew, paint spattering wild, yet leaving the canvas untouched where it wasn't welcome. And in moments, shapes began to emerge, though neither sister could have drawn a stick figure an hour earlier. Bertie's painting took shape first, a floating angel with dark wings and a spear made of silver so bright it looked alive on the canvas. The being, it was Bertie, there could be no doubt, hovered over a field strewn with broken flowers and mud, churned from war horses too numerous to count. Arrows lay everywhere, and overhead even the crows looked away, so fearful of meeting her terrible beauty that they might not survive the slightest glance. Her breasts were encased in armor streaked with the day's brutality, but even in her terrible truth, there was a beauty so perfect it defied the eye. Do you see? He asked. I do, Bertie said. I'm a fighter? You're a goddess of war. You are victory itself if only you were given the right canvas, he said. She continued to paint, a sun fleeing over hills where fires burn, still bright with the light of her truth. Then, as suddenly as it began, she was done, slumping to the side, only to be caught in Naram Sin's powerful arms. He lowered her to the floor, where the brush fell from her open, stained fingers, her lips parted in a sensual pose like a painter's dream. Then it was Stella's turn to reach the apex of her purpose. Where Bertie had been a dark goddess, she was light, bright, white, cleansing, a beatific saint walking over gardens of green and gold. She was life itself, her robe open to expose pink flesh and the hue of all that was good in the universe. She was love. She was birth. Her smile was incandescent, a smear of brilliance that threatened to sear the canvas it was painted on. And Stella finally stopped after one final delicate swipe as she painted crimson lips. Then the brush fell with a clatter. You are goodness and light, his voice growled. Then he caught her, too, and in a moment they both slipped quietly into a sleep so deep that not even the stars dared disturb them. It need not be hung. It simply will be, Naram Sin told both sisters when they awoke, the sun long since gone to other places. Stella and Bertie felt an electric chill as they looked at the packages wrapped in a fine cloth and handed to them, both without a word. How much do we, Bertie said, but Naram Sin waved her concerns away. Stella hesitated, then asked, what if it don't work? He smiled at her and she felt not small, but seen. It is as you wish. Place the talismans above your bed and you will have what you asked. I give you my word, he said. Not much of a guarantee, but okay, Bertie said, recovering some of her natural sass. When Naram Sin turned to her, the world shifted, but Stella caught her elbow. He was different again, taller, his hair blacker than midnight, oiled curls gleaming, and a hypnotic power that reached into her essence. For an instant, she knew fear. Then he smiled, touching her shoulder with two fingers spread wide in an ancient gesture of life and blessing. She could feel the heat of him even through her coat. It's more guarantee than you could ever have, lady. He stared at her, his black eyes gleaming with the power of eternity. What I give you is the word of a god. Cleet stared at her, his eyes goggling at the woman who waited on the bed. Stell? His question was everything, his want, his need, and fear. He felt a touch of fear. She was luminous, her body supine, but somehow waiting like a trap. Come to bed, dear, she commanded. He got on the bed as her legs fell apart, welcoming him inside. Above her, the picture pulsed as they began to move against each other, the bed shrieking in protest as he reached a shattering end less than a minute later. Damn, sorry, honey, she said, he said, but she only smiled, clamping her legs around him like a velvet vice. Where do you think you're going? She asked. Her voice had a feral note that made his senses come alive. Well, I'm done, so she reached back, touching the picture with a lover's caress, then waved toward his groin. He was erect again, instantly, painfully so, and sweat sprang out on his forehead before running down each cheek to fall on his chest in a fitful patter. From outside the open window, a howl of panic split the air from next door. I guess Gimme got the news too, she said, laughing as she moved against him, and his hips began to move in unison, like when they were young. New rules around here, partner. Her eyes closed as she began a long, slow grind against him, each second stretching into eternity. I'll tell you when we're done. And we're done. So, I hope you enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed writing it. I wanted to write some humor. I wanted to write sort of the unfolding of these two women as a flower, and as powerful beings unto their own right. And then one of the other things that this is a, and thank you for saying hello. That's Shuggy is back there. I have a theme in a lot of the things that I write, and this is something I talk about all the time. I am a Floridian. I was born and raised in South Florida. Then I lived in upstate New York for several years, and now I live in beautiful Tennessee. And I'm very fortunate to live everywhere that I have. Um, so I'm not necessarily a true Southerner, but I find myself fiercely defensive about the South because there's a sweetness to the South um, that gets attacked. Um, and Southerners are portrayed as, mouth breathers. And I'm thinking to myself, is everybody aware of who is from the South? William Faulkner. I mean, think about the novels that were written, the Southern Gothic novels, the compendium of Southern culture that is so beautiful. And so I find myself naturally gravitating towards writing defensive treaties of Southern culture. Um, and it sort of flares up occasionally in stories like that, where you have these Southern women, who are fairly ordinary people at the beginning, but then at the end, they're not. They have become a goddess in their own skin through this conduit who happens to be a god. And I really like that thematic element. So, um, in any case, thank you very much for joining me. I started I got a very crazy, wonderful idea and started, it unfolded so quickly, as my ideas tend to, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but it unfolded very quickly. And I am going to continue writing these sort of urban fantasy romances, I think, just because it feels very natural to do so. So I will continue. Oh, and I wanted to point out, so that's actually a book by my friend Jacob Holo and his wonderful wife. I call them Team Holo. Heather and Jacob have been friends of mine for several years. We started, but I'm going to start putting books behind me that are by friends of mine as well, because I want to promote my friends because they all write such great stuff. And it's one of the side benefits of being a writer is that you get to read great books by people who you have had breakfast and lunch and coffee with and stuff like that. And it's kind of a cool side detail. So in any case, I've been yapping for 17 minutes. I got a wonderful little shipment of breakfast themed waffle charms. So I'm going to send, so um, next week, we're going to start reading some more halfway stuff and also a little bit of an introduction to my sci-fi. And I'm going to give away breakfast themed waffle charms to two folks who are here. So the only favor that I would ask you is support independent authors. I don't care who they are. If they're writing and putting their stuff out there, let's support them. And ask people to join my channel. I would very much like to get to enough subscriptions that I can use my phone, which has a far superior camera. And I would kind of like to do that. It's something I've sort of challenged myself to. So bring me friends to join us here, and I will share with prizes. How's that sound? I hope you're all healthy and safe. Thank you very much for joining me. Remember to wash your hands, and I will see you here next week. Okay? Cheers.